top 10 finest Federation starships in the Star Trek universe. In the hopes that the design of the new USS Discovery will be drastically improved, we look at some of the best starships Star Trek has given us so far. The newest incarnation of Star Trek is, apparently, about to start filming anytime now. Called Star Trek Discovery, little is known about the show. However, a teaser trailer from the San Diego Comic-Con last year showed footage of the new starship emerging from space dock, and fans were understandably outraged. The angular abomination looked amateur and unworthy of being in the greatest sci-fi franchise of all time. Based on an unused Ralph McQuarrie concept for the USS Enterprise from the unmade movie Star Trek, Planet of the Titans, it almost appears to be a marriage of Starfleet and Klingon design. Fans flocked to comment online, and the general consensus was that everyone hoped this was simply a first draft and the ship would be vastly improved before the new series aired. So instead, here are some of Starfleet's most memorable interstellar incarnations. Note: this does not include any craft from the Kelvin Timeline, 'cause that's just rubbish. Number 10. USS Enterprise, an X-01. Type: Warp 5 prototype / long-range cruiser. Class: Naval Experimental, an X. As seen in Star Trek Enterprise. In service from 2151. Status: retired. A total of 9 Starfleet ships have carried the name Enterprise, from NX to Constitution class, Sovereign and Odyssey class, and ultimately ending up with Universe class commissioned in the 26th century, and most of them were gorgeous. However, it all started with the NX-01 Warp 5 prototype, under the command of Captain Archer. What made this ship, her crew, and the series Enterprise stand out was their inability to depend on technology, simply because much of it didn't exist yet. The NX-01 didn't even have shields. Instead, she was equipped with variable-phased polarized graviton-emitting hull plating. When she launched, it had no personnel transporters, she carried nuclear torpedoes, and when the engines broke down, the chief engineer would sometimes get covered in oil. There was no wave a tool with a bright light at the end nonsense that began to dominate in the 24th century set series. Number 9. USS Ares, NCC 1650. Type: Battle Cruiser. Class: Ares class prototype. As seen in Star Trek Prelude to Axanar. In service from 2240. Status: decommissioned. Without a doubt this deserves a mention, not only because the ship itself is pretty cool, but also because Star Trek Prelude to Axanar has had such a hard time of late. In fact, only very recently CBS, Paramount, and the production team behind the crowd-funded fan film finally reached an agreement over the copyright issues. It's just a shame that the television studios can't work together to give the fans what they want, which is more Star Trek. During the first 2 years of the 4 Years' War, Starfleet was experiencing near-constant defeat at the hands of the Imperial Klingon Navy's D6 battle cruiser, so the design and production of Starfleet's first-ever dedicated warship, the Ares class, began. Following a successful proof of concept at the Battle of Cygnus III, the Constitution-class heavy cruiser was developed, with the first 2 ships being the USS Constitution NCC 1700 and the USS Enterprise NCC 1701. Number 8. USS Entente, NCC 2120. Type: Heavy Battle Cruiser. Class: Dreadnought class. As seen in, mentioned in Star Trek, the motion picture, Starfleet Technical Manual. In service from 2259. Status: retired. The Dreadnought is a seldom-seen class of starship, but her unusual, heavy-duty, 3-warp nacelle design makes it worthy of an inclusion. Not a great deal has been written about this ship, and the Entente herself was probably the best known of the Dreadnought-class starships, which equates to basically a brief mention in Star Trek lore. It could even be argued that the refitted USS Enterprise, NCC 1701D, under the command of Admiral William Riker from the final, epic 2-part Star Trek, The Next Generation episode All Good Things, was now Dreadnought class, especially when you also remember the colossal phaser cannon fitted under the saucer section. There were variations on the distinct dreadnought design, the USS Niagara, NCC 58800, for instance, had her third nacelle fitted underneath the primary hull, and earlier variations had the shuttle bay at the forward end of the primary hull, above the deflector dish. Number 7. USS Reliant, NCC 1864. Type: medium-range destroyer. Class: Miranda class. As seen in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. In service from 2266. Status: destroyed. Back in 1982, following Star Trek, the motion picture, this was the first time we'd really got a good look at another Federation starship that wasn't either A, the Enterprise, or B, Constitution class. It's instantly recognizable as a Starfleet ship, and yet it has subtle design differences. Moreover, not only did Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan save the franchise, but it's also the best science fiction movie ever made. Sadly, the Reliant was destroyed in 2285 in the Mutara Nebula after it had been commandeered by the 20th century genetically engineered criminal Khan Noonan Singh. The Genesis device was detonated from inside the ship, causing complete destruction. Number 6. USS Lynx, NCC. Type: Timeship prototype. Class: Lynx class, a modification of the Monacheros class scout ship. As seen in official Starfleet blueprints from 1991 and just one or two fan sites online, possibly due its highly classified nature. In service from 2286. Status: theoretically still operational. Not only is this starship unconventional in its design and thus have an extremely cool appearance, but it's also not very well known at all, even among the hardcore Star Trek fanbase. Way back in the early 90s, long before things like the internet, Starfleet blueprints were only available to buy through sci-fi magazines like Starlog and even Omni. However, they were still considered canon since they came from official sources. The USS Lynx achieves retrograde time travel through the precise application of the cold start formulation of the primary warp engine. Timeslip occurs at a constant velocity of warp 1.5 and can be maintained indefinitely. Cold start of warp drives is dangerous using normal warp configurations because of inadequate heat dissipation properties of primary and secondary intercoolers away from the matter-antimatter intermixed chamber. The USS Lynx is outfitted with intercoolers rated 300% over standard dissipation rates to cope with increased heat buildup. She was equipped with a cloaking device for use when in orbit around inhabited planets during a different time period, some 25 years before the Treaty of Algeran. As with all authorized Federation time travel missions, the crew of the USS Lynx operated on a very strict set of orders, including the unconditional restriction of all contact with life forms and even self-destruct if the ship became stranded for any reason in a time period other than its own. Number 5. USS Stargazer, NCC 2893. Type: long-range cruiser. Class: Constellation class. As seen in Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Battle, Season 1, Episode 8, Pocketbooks, Star Trek, Stargazer series and novels, Honor Blade, The Valiant and the Buried Age. In service from 2329. Status: recovered. A vastly underrated Federation starship, the Stargazer not only looks awesome, 4 warp engines and 4 forward-facing torpedo bays, but it still retains a noticeable amount of styling from the late 23rd century, much like the USS Reliant. Add to which of course it became Jean-Luc Picard's first command. History was made during the Battle of Moxia in 2355, when the Stargazer came under attack from an unknown alien vessel, later determined to be of Ferengi origin, suffering significant damage, including loss of shields and crew casualties including Captain Manning. Lieutenant Commander Picard took command. In a desperate struggle to survive and with only warp drive and minimal weapons left functioning, Picard accelerated at warp speed directly towards the Ferengi ship, dropping out of warp just a second later. Because the distance traveled was so small, for an instant, the Stargazer appeared to be in 2 places at once. The Ferengi fired at the wrong target, giving time for Picard to launch a full barrage of photon torpedoes, destroying the enemy ship. This improvised battle tactic has since become known as the Picard Maneuver. Number 4. USS Pegasus, NCC 53847. Type: light cruiser, refitted as prototype for extended experimentation. Class: Oberth class. As seen in Star Trek: The Next Generation, the Pegasus, Season 7, Episode 12, and novel A Time to Love. In service from 2358. Status: wrecked. From the outside, the Pegasus looks identical to the USS Grissom, destroyed by Klingon attack while in orbit around the Genesis planet in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. This stands to reason since they are both Oberth-class medium cruisers. However, that's where the similarities end. The Pegasus became a controversial subject, deemed highly classified and ultimately shrouded in cloak and dagger-style mystery. In 2358, the Pegasus was commanded by Captain Eric Pressman, and included Ensign William T. Riker on his first assignment out of the Academy. In that year, the Pegasus was assigned to conduct a test of a phasing cloaking device, in direct violation of the Treaty of Algeran. During the test, an explosion occurred in main engineering, resulting in heavy casualties. Several members of the crew, including First Officer Ron Moore and the Chief Engineer, mutinied in an attempt to shut down the illegal test. Pressman, Riker, and 7 other crew members fled the ship in an escape pod. Not long after departing, they witnessed a large explosion in space. No wreckage was found, and the vessel was believed to have been destroyed by a warp core breach. In fact, the Pegasus was not destroyed but rather drifted in phased cloak form until it rematerialized inside asteroid Gamma 601, half of it in solid rock, in the Deviant system. Number 3. USS Excalibur, NCC 26517. Type: heavy cruiser. Class: Ambassador class. As seen in, mentioned in Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Measure of a Man, Season 2, Episode 9, and Star Trek: Voyager Survival Instinct, Season 6, Episode 2, and numerous novels, including Star Trek: New Frontier, Enigma, Reunion, and Dark Allies. In service from 2362. Status: destroyed. The USS Excalibur is an Ambassador-class vessel, arguably the best-looking of all Federation starships, hence its inclusion in this list. The design represents the middle ground between the styles of 23rd and 24th century Starfleet ships, with visible influences from both periods. In fact, it was intermediate in size between the Excelsior class and the Galaxy class. Under Captain Al Smutko, the Excalibur survived an attack by the Borg, but several members of the crew were assimilated in the encounter. Following the vessel's refit in 2373, command was given to Captain Mackenzie Calhoun, and she was involved in a significant number of key Starfleet operations. She was destroyed in 2376 by a Neurobian virus planted in the ship's computer core during the Double Helix crisis. The USS Enterprise, NCC 1701C, was another Ambassador-class starship. Under the command of Captain Rachel Garrett, the Enterprise was destroyed defending a Klingon outpost on Narendra 3 from Romulan attack. The brave actions of the crew led to peace between the Klingon Empire and a united federation of planets. Number 2. USS Hood, NCC 2541. Type: heavy cruiser. Class: Excelsior class. As seen in, she appears in several episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, including Encounter at Farpoint, Season 1, Episode 1, Tin Man, Season 3, Episode 20, and is mentioned in many others. She is also mentioned in numerous novels including Imzadi, Demons of Air and Darkness, A Time to Heal, Articles of the Federation, and A Singular Destiny. In service from 2361. Status: active. Almost as well known through Starfleet as the name Enterprise, Hood also comes from excellent pedigree. Under the command of Captain Robert DeSoto, a man with a legendary reputation equal only to Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the USS Hood was the sole surviving vessel of the Battle of Wolf 359 in 2367, as referenced in Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Drumhead, Season 4, Episode 21. She also survived the Dominion War and the Borg invasion of 2381. There's a little confusion in Trek lore over the correct registry number for the USS Hood. However, it's been confirmed as NCC 2541, therefore making her a close contemporary sister ship of the USS Repulse NCC 2544, further establishing a Starfleet practice that when a ship was named for a historical counterpart, they are sometimes paired in the same class with other contemporary historical counterparts. The historic HMS Hood and HMS Repulse were contemporary British battle cruisers who shared a similar fate in World War II. Other examples include the USS Enterprise, NCC 1701, and the USS Lexington, NCC 1709, as well as the USS Monitor, NCC 61826, and the USS Merrimack, NCC 61827. Number 1. USS Defiant, an X-74205. Type, escort cruiser. Class, naval experimental, an X. As seen in Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, First Contact. In service from 2370. Status, destroyed. Development on the Defiant began in response to the Borg threat to the Federation. Although officially classified as an escort vessel, the Defiant was nothing less than Starfleet's first design of warship, designed to combat the Borg. She featured minimal equipment for scientific research and was not designed to accommodate families. The Defiant did not perform well in its initial trial runs. It was overpowered and overgunned for a ship of its size, so much so that the Defiant nearly shook itself apart when the engines were tested at full power. These design flaws, combined with the Borg threat becoming less urgent, led Starfleet to abandon the project and place the prototype in storage. After the USS Odyssey was destroyed in late 2370, Commander Benjamin Sisko, who served on the team that designed the Defiant, requested that the vessel be pulled out of storage and assigned to Deep Space Nine to counter the new threat of the Dominion. After many years of extremely active service, including the Battle of Sector 001, the USS Defiant was destroyed at the Second Battle of Chintoka,